Hi everybody, it's Susan from Sunrise Quilt Studio, and today I have another vintage quilt block for you. This one is called Rocky Mountain Chain Block, and this is a 10-inch block, and it uses some small pieces in it. So these little square and a square units here, the pieces here are, you cut them 1.5 inches square, so they're kind of small, but none of the techniques are difficult. We're making square and a square units and half square triangles and using rectangles and squares. So but there are a lot of pieces, so I'm considering this an intermediate level quilt. So I would suggest that you take your time when you're making this block, but I do hope you'll give it a try. So please stay with me and I'll show you how to put this block together. Here are the fabrics you're going to need to make the Rocky Mountain chain block. For A, you're going to need 5 2.5-inch squares. For B, you need 4 3-inch squares. C is 8 2.5-inch squares. D is 4 3-inch squares. E is 8 2.5 by 1.5-inch rectangles. F is 16 1.5-inch squares. Now on the D squares, you're going to want to draw a diagonal line on the wrong side from one corner to the opposite, and the same for the F. Now if you're using a diagonal seam tape on your machine, you won't need to do this, or any kind of a seam guide, you won't need to do that. But I know these are tiny pieces and they're not my favorite to work with, but this is a really pretty block and I thought I would show you how to make this one. So we're going to go to the sewing machine and start by making half square triangles. Okay, to make half square triangles we need the B and the D squares, and we're going to put those right sides together and sew 1/4 inch away from both sides of the drawn line on the back of the D squares. So right sides together, and you can pin these if you want. And I'm using my 1/4 inch foot. I have a 50 weight thread, and I'm going to use a 2.0 stitch length. See if I can get my thread in the right spot. Here we go. Swing it around and sew on the other side. Now this is just one. You can chain piece these together, and if you've been with me for a while, you know I say that every single time. But here we have 2 half square triangles, just like that. So I'm going to finish the others and then I will press them and we can move on to the next step. So here are the half square triangles. I've got them all pressed, and I went ahead and I trimmed off the dog ears, but they have to be trimmed down to 2.5 inches square, so that was just kind of an extra step that really wasn't needed. And you can do that when you're trimming them down. Now they're going to be really close to the right size, so if you don't have much to trim off, you know, that's fine. That's perfectly fine. Some you may find you'll have more to trim off than others. I'm going to turn this one around. So I'm lining up the diagonal line on the seam and these 2 edges with the 2.5 inch mark, and then trimming them down. So there's just a little bit that needs to be trimmed off, not much. Okay, now we're going to make the square and a square unit. So we need the A squares and these little F squares, and we need to make 4 of these, so you need 4 little squares for each one, and you're going to lay that on one corner, and then you're going to sew from this corner to that corner. If you've drawn a line, draw on the drawn line. If you haven't drawn a line, then you need to keep that stitching straight. And I'm going to do this in the chain piecing method. Okay, you can have one A square left over, and this is for the center of the block, so just lay that aside. And I'm just going to turn these around, and I'm going to sew a small square to the opposite corner. So you can keep these chained together, or you can take them apart, however you want to do that. And if you like using foundation paper to make these, you can do that. Okay, here we go. Now, I'm going to trim these corners, and you can use your rotary cutter and mat, or you could use scissors, whatever you want to do, but trim so that you leave a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. So you're just cutting off little bitty pieces, you're not cutting off much. You want to do that on both sides. And this doesn't have to be real accurate, that's why it's okay to use your scissors. And I'm going to go ahead and separate them, because I need to press after this. And it's easier to press if they're not attached to each other, at least in my opinion. Okay, so I have these shapes, and I'm going to press them open towards the background piece, so towards the white. And so we will have this look, and then we will attach the other two squares to the red corners here. So I'm going to go ahead and press. Okay, so here are the first two corners put on the square and a square unit. So I'm going to press them out, and I'm going to start by just pressing flat, and then pressing out. And if you have a tailor's clapper, you can use that to help flatten that. A lot of times I find just turning them upside down like that will help. I'm just pressing them down a little bit. I don't happen to own a tailor's clapper, so I've not tried them, but I've seen people do it, and it seems to work really well. It would be something I need to put on my wish list. Okay. Now we're going to sew the triangles onto, or the squares onto the opposite corners to create those triangles like this. So let's go back to the sewing machine. Okay, so I'm going to just do the same thing, just do the opposite corners, and sew from one corner to the next. Okay, now we need to sew the E-rectangles to the sides of these, and what we're going to do is do it to two opposite sides. So since this is symmetrical, it doesn't matter which side as long as you do opposite sides. So I'm going to just lay them all out like this, stack these all on top, and then I'm going to sew them together. So these to this side, this to that side, and then we'll start making the corner units. So we got a couple more steps to go yet. Okay, I'm going to chain piece all of these together. Okay, so now we need to make the corner units, and I have separated the C squares into two sets of 4, and they're going to go opposite each other, and the half square triangles are in two sets of 4, and they're going to go opposite each other, and the background is going to go towards the center. So I'm going to sew these two together and these two together, and then sew them together in rows. It's just going to be a 4 patch, and after that we can lay the block out and sew it into rows and then sew the rows together. Okay, so these are ready to be sewn together, and I press towards the pink, which is the single square here in the back. So these should nest together. So you just want to make sure you have your backgrounds in the center. So that's the seam you want to sew. So I'm just nesting my seams, and we're just going to sew. Here are the pieces for the block. We have the corner units, which is the 4-patch with the half square triangles. We have the square and a square units with the rectangles on 2 opposite sides, and then we have the center A square. So we're going to start with the corner, and we're going to put the corners so that the solid squares are pointing out. So they're going to go like this. And then between each of these is going to be one of the square and a square units. It's going to go between each one. And the A square is going to be in the center. So here we go. So this is the Rocky Mountain chain block. So I'm going to sew it all into rows, and then I will sew the rows together, and we'll have the block done. press the seam back the way it's supposed to be. Now there's a lot of seams in this block, and it is a little more challenging, so I would call this an intermediate block. But I think it's a very interesting block. So there we go. So this is the Rocky Mountain chain block. Well, that is it for the Rocky Mountain chain block. I think this is a really interesting block. You could use all different colors with this one. Put them together in a whole bunch of them together in a quilt and make some interesting secondary patterns. So I hope you give this one a try, and just remember to take your time with this one because it has a lot of pieces in it, and it does take some time, and for the accuracy it'll be better off if you just slow down a little bit. So anyway, I hope you'll give this one a try. Now if you like this video, please click that like button and share it with your friends. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, and click that notification bell so you'll be notified when the next video comes up. And in the meantime, I hope you are all staying safe and healthy, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching. For more quilting ideas, click on the video links. And to keep up with my latest projects, click on the subscribe button. I hope to see you again soon.